The bridge at midnight, when a child's voice broke through the darkness. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement like scattered diamonds, their glow muted by the heavy mist that clung to the bridge. It was past midnight, and the world felt suspended in that peculiar silence that comes when most people are asleep, when the noise of daily life fades and leaves only the sound of your own thoughts, sometimes the most dangerous sound of all. She stood at the railing, her hands gripping the cold metal so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The black leather outfit she wore seemed like armor, but armor that had finally failed to protect her from the weight of everything she'd been carrying. Below, the water moved dark and indifferent, offering what seemed like the only solution to pain that had become unbearable. In her mind, she'd already made the decision. She was just gathering the courage to follow through. That's when she heard the small voice. "Why are you standing so close to the edge?" The question came from behind her, innocent and curious, lacking any of the judgment or alarm that adult voices would have carried. She turned to see a little girl in a bright pink raincoat, her curly hair slightly damp from the earlier rain. The child couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old, holding the hand of a man who stood beside her, his expression shifting from casual to alert as he registered the scene before him. I just wanted to look at the water," she heard herself say, her voice sounding strange and distant. The little girl tilted her head, considering this answer with the seriousness that children bring to important matters. "It's too dark to see anything good," she said matter-of-factly. "My daddy says the bridge is prettier in the daytime. The water sparkles then, like your jacket. Your jacket sparkles too. I like it." Something about that simple observation, that her jacket sparkled, that this child had noticed something beautiful about her when all she could see in herself was brokenness, created a tiny crack in the wall of despair that had been closing in around her. She found herself looking down at the leather sleeve, seeing the way the streetlights caught the subtle sheen of the material. "Thank you," she whispered. The man, understanding now what he had stumbled upon, took a careful step forward. His face showed concern but not panic, wisdom in his measured approach. "It's a cold night to be out here alone," he said gently. "We were just heading home. Would you like to walk with us for a bit? My daughter has been talking nonstop since we left her grandmother's house. I could use someone else to listen to her stories." The little girl nodded enthusiastically, apparently oblivious to the gravity of the moment. "I can tell you about my cat. His name is Muffin and he's orange and he sleeps on my pillow even though Mommy says he's not supposed to." Despite everything, despite the darkness that had brought her to this bridge, she felt the corners of her mouth twitch. Not quite a smile, but something close. The child's energy was like a beam of light in a pitch-black room. It didn't illuminate everything, but it showed that light still existed. "I don't want to interrupt your night," she said, but even as she spoke, she felt her grip on the railing loosening slightly. "You wouldn't be interrupting," the man said, his voice warm but firm. "Sometimes the best part of a night is the unexpected conversations. Besides, my daughter clearly thinks you're someone worth talking to, and she's usually a pretty good judge of character." The little girl had already let go of her father's hand and moved closer, looking up with eyes full of uncomplicated kindness. "What's your name?" "Mine is Zara. That's with a Z, which makes it special. That's what my daddy says." That's a beautiful name," she said, and found herself taking a step back from the railing, then another. The distance she created felt monumental, like she was walking away from the edge of the world rather than just a few feet of wet pavement. "So what's yours?" Zara persisted, reaching out to touch the leather jacket with one small finger. "Is it something sparkly too?" She took a shaky breath, feeling tears start to build behind her eyes. When had she last told someone her name and felt like it mattered? When had anyone last looked at her with this kind of simple, genuine interest in who she was as a person? "Maya," she said softly. "My name is Maya. That's pretty. Like in that movie with the bees. You know the one, Daddy?" The man nodded, and Maya could see in his eyes that he understood exactly what was happening here, what his daughter's innocent intervention had just prevented. There was no judgment in his gaze, only compassion and a quiet determination to keep this stranger talking, to keep her connected to the present moment and to life itself. "Listen, Maya," he said carefully. There's a cafe about 2 blocks from here that stays open late. They make terrible coffee, but amazing hot chocolate. What do you say we get out of this cold? My treat." Maya hesitated, part of her still pulled toward the darkness, toward the solution that had seemed so clear just minutes ago. But another part of her, a part she thought had died long ago, was responding to the warmth being offered, to the lifeline being thrown. "I don't want to be a burden," she started, but Zara was already tugging at her hand. "You're not a burden. Daddy's always saying we should be kind to people. And I want to show you the picture I drew at Grandma's house. I have it in my backpack." And somehow, impossibly, Maya found herself walking away from the railing, away from the edge, flanked by this man and his daughter who had appeared at exactly the right moment. Or perhaps, she thought, there was no such thing as chance. Perhaps the universe, in its mysterious way, had sent this child and her father to remind her that connection still existed, that someone still saw her, that her presence in the world mattered to someone, even if that someone was a little girl she'd just met. As they walked, Zara chattered about Muffin the cat, about her grandmother's cookies, about the rain and the lights, and 100 other small observations. Maya listened, letting the words wash over her like a gentle tide, pulling her back to shore. The man walked on her other side, a steady presence, occasionally catching her eye with a look that said, "You're not alone. We see you. Please, stay." The cafe, when they reached it, was nearly empty except for a tired-looking barista and an elderly man reading a newspaper. The fluorescent lights were harsh after the soft glow of the street lamps, but there was warmth here, and the smell of coffee and cinnamon. Zara immediately claimed a booth by the window, pulling Maya down beside her while her father went to order. "Can I tell you a secret?" Zara whispered, leaning close. Maya nodded, finding herself genuinely curious. "Sometimes I get really sad, like when my goldfish died. His name was Bubbles. I cried for a whole day. But then Daddy said something that made me feel better." "What did he say?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said that feelings are like weather. Sometimes it rains, and sometimes it's sunny, but it always changes. Even when it feels like the rain will never stop, it does. It always does." Zara looked up at her with those wide, earnest eyes. "Are you having a rainy day?" Maya felt something break inside her chest, but this time it wasn't the shattering of hope. It was the cracking open of walls she'd built so high and thick that no light could get through. Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she nodded. "The rainiest," she managed to say. Zara considered this seriously, then reached over and patted Maya's hand with her small one. "That's okay. My daddy says it's okay to cry. And you know what? Tomorrow might be sunny, or maybe the next day. But it will be, eventually. I promise." The man returned with 3 steaming mugs of hot chocolate, each topped with whipped cream and chocolate shavings. He set them down and slid into the booth across from them, his eyes taking in Maya's tears without comment, giving her the dignity of her emotions without forcing her to explain them. "Daddy, I told her about the weather thing," Zara announced proudly. He smiled, a gentle expression that creased the corners of his eyes. "That's good, sweetheart. It's one of the most important things I know." He looked at Maya. "I learned it the hard way after my wife, Zara's mom, passed away 3 years ago. There were days when I stood in places not unlike that bridge, wondering if the pain would ever ease. But it did. Slowly, in small increments, it did." Maya wrapped her hands around the warm mug, letting the heat seep into her cold fingers. "How?" she asked, the question raw and desperate. "How did you keep going?" "Honestly, some days I kept going because I had no choice. I had a little girl who needed me. Some days I kept going because I'd made a promise to myself to see one more sunrise. And some days I kept going because a stranger showed me kindness, reminded me that the world still had good in it." He paused, taking a sip of his hot chocolate. "The thing about those dark moments is that they feel permanent. They feel like the truth of everything, but they're not. They're just moments, Maya. Terrible, painful moments, but still just moments." Zara had pulled out her drawing, a colorful crayon creation of what appeared to be a rainbow over a house with a very orange cat in the window. "This is for you," she said, pushing it across the table to Maya, "so you can remember that rain makes rainbows." Maya took the drawing with trembling hands, staring at the bright colors, at the careful way this child had colored inside most of the lines, at the pure joy evident in every stroke. When was the last time someone had given her a gift? When was the last time she'd felt worthy of receiving one? "Thank you," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "Thank you both. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there tonight." The man reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers, asking permission. When she didn't pull away, he gently squeezed her fingers. "But we were there, and you're here now. That's what matters. The question isn't what would have happened, it's what happens next." They sat in that cafe for 2 more hours, talking and not talking, Zara eventually falling asleep against Maya's shoulder. The man, his name was Marcus, she learned, told her about grief support groups, about therapists who had helped him, about helplines she could call. He didn't push, didn't lecture, just offered information like gifts she could choose to accept or decline. When they finally left, the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Marcus walked Maya to a taxi, made sure she had his phone number, made her promise to call if she needed someone to talk to. Zara, sleepy but still concerned, hugged Maya's legs fiercely. "Remember the weather," she mumbled into Maya's jacket. "It changes." As the taxi pulled away, Maya clutched Zara's drawing in her lap and watched the bridge recede in the distance. She wasn't fixed, her problems hadn't disappeared, her pain hadn't vanished. But something had shifted. A child had seen her sparkle when she couldn't see it herself. Strangers had chosen kindness over convenience, and somehow, impossibly, she had chosen to stay. The road ahead was still uncertain, still frightening, but as the sun began to break through the clouds, Maya allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the weather really could change. And perhaps that was enough reason to wait and see.